The courtroom went quiet as Kody Brown entered. America's most well-known polygamous dad, now with the battle of his life ahead of him. The flash of cameras, the murmurs in the air, and the question looming large hung in the balance. Would today be the day his family's world came crashing down forever? The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and in a split second, all eyes in the courtroom turned. The room was heavy, filled with curiosity, criticism, and a dash of fear. Entering the room, Kody Brown smoothed his jacket, his expression a mask of resolve coupled with fatigue. For decades, millions had known him as the charismatic patriarch of TLC's Sister Wives, a man who welcomed the world into his living room and invited them to share in the joys, struggles, and conflicts of raising a huge family based on plural marriage. But today, there were no cameras in his house, no laughing kids at the dinner table, no cozy family confessions. But instead, there were journalists with pencils scratching wildly on notebooks, news camera flashes illuminating blindingly bright lights, and a stern-faced judge looming from the bench. This wasn't reality television. This was reality. And reality had led him to the one place he dreaded most. A courtroom where the existence of his family was being challenged. The room itself was a stage, but one with long-term consequences rather than television viewing figures. Wooden benches filled with onlookers, some fans, some critics, whispered among themselves as Kody stepped in. A few moved in closer, eager for any information. Others shook their heads in disapproval, sure that the man standing before them had not just broken laws, but the moral fabric of society. The members of the jury sat apart, their expression neutral masks, though their eyes betrayed a look of curiosity. How could they be anything other than curious? This wasn't a standard criminal case after all. It wasn't about violence or theft or fraud. It was about a man, his religion, his family, and a way of life that conflicted with the written law of the land. Some of the jurors had undoubtedly watched the show. Perhaps they had caught a glimpse of the wives preparing meals in one kitchen, kids playing in one giant living room, or Kody commuting between homes, dividing time among his wives. Now the same jurors were being asked to decide if what they witnessed on television was entertainment alone or proof of crime. The tension was so charged that even the rustle of papers from the clerk's desk sounded greater than it actually did. The judge struck the gavel once. Order in the court. It didn't take much to know that America had been intrigued by Kody Brown since Sister Wives debuted in 2010. To some, the show was a guilty indulgence. To others, it was a glimpse into a world they didn't comprehend. For many, it was provocative, a challenge to conventional notions of family and marriage. And now this interest had leaked from the television screen into reality. News media referred to it as the trial that could redefine family law. Social media was on fire with hashtags such as #BrownTrial and #FamilyVerseLaw. Supporters came out in support, proclaiming that love should never be criminal. Opponents seethed, claiming the Browns were promoting a lifestyle that did not belong in contemporary America. Within the courtroom, Kody could feel the brunt of all those eyes, both within it and outside. He wasn't simply a man who was being tried. He was a symbol. As Kody sat beside his attorney, he attempted to calm his breathing. His thoughts weren't on the cameras or the news personnel, or even the judge. They were on his family. He saw Mary, his first wife, who had been with him in the earliest of days. He saw Janelle, the reliable one, always practical, always a pillar. Christine he thought of, her laughter, her candor, her suffering. And then Robin, the youngest, who had filled their lives with joy and with contention. And beyond them, he considered his children, 18 lives woven together with his. All innocent, all trapped in the hurricane of choices they never made. What will become of them if I lose? He mused. What does happen if they take everything we've built? Judge Harrison, an old man with silver hair and a keen eye, pushed up his glasses and leaned down toward Kody. His face was inscrutable. This was not the first contentious case this judge had heard, but even he understood that this trial was special. He swallowed hard, his voice ringing out in the room. This court will now consider the case of the state versus Kody Brown. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For years, people had debated the legality of the Browns' lifestyle. But hearing it said aloud in a court of law made it real. Heavy, undeniable. Brown family supporters packed one side of the courtroom. They wore determined faces, some even carrying little signs that said love is love or family first. They weren't merely fans of the show. They were believers in the right to live differently, to pursue faith and heart rather than punishment. On the other side, there were critics in the benches. Some were area religious figures. Others ordinary people who viewed the case as a fight for moral beliefs. To them, this was not about love. This was about law and order. About safeguarding society from what they perceived as perilous precedents. The bifurcation was so clear it was almost palpable in the air as if drawn along the room. When finally Kody raised his gaze in the direction of the jury, he scanned their faces for a moment of comprehension. One juror, an elderly woman with gentle eyes, returned a fleeting glance before gazing away. Another, a suit-clad man with a stern expression, glared at him as if already persuaded of his guilt. It hit Kody then, his destiny, and that of his family, did not simply depend upon his testimony or his attorney's words, but on the unspoken mind of 12 strangers. Strangers who may never fully grasp his universe. The bailiff summoned order again, and the courtroom fell silent. It was only the start, but the air was already thick with tension. The Browns had welcomed cameras into their lives for years, but this was a set they could never master. Here they could not control what was shown. Here their lives would be picked apart by attorneys, scrutinized by strangers, and judged by the courts. For Kody, this moment was not merely about legal technicalities. It was about confirming that his family existed, that his decisions had been made in love and faith, not crime or corruption. The burden of it almost crushed him. But he sat up straight, determined to weather whatever tempest lay ahead. As the opening arguments were about to start, the country outside held its breath. TV pundits speculated, YouTubers uploaded reaction videos, and social media rang with speculation. Would Kody be punished? Would the family have to break up? Or would this trial set the stage for a new definition of what family might look like in America? In the courtroom, the judge brought up his gavel again. The sound rang out, clear and definitive. This trial starts now. And so began the Brown family's epic struggle. The stage was set, the actors were assembled, and the world was watching the judge's gavel rapped again, calling for silence. His voice rang strong. This court will hear the case concerning Mr. Kody Brown and the allegations made by the state. The words cut through the air like a knife. The world had already argued over whether polygamy was to be accepted or rejected. But today the argument was no longer taking place in television living rooms or on talk shows. It was taking place here, inside a dignified courtroom. In the shadow of the law, a dark blue-jacketed man with sharp features stood up from the table of the prosecution. His name was Daniel Cross, and he was a state prosecutor, known for being relentless. Each step he took toward the jury was calculated. Each look was intentional. He started speaking in a tone that had both authority and accusation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are going to see is not a case about one man and his family. It is a case about respect for the law. Our state is founded upon order, upon rules that are applicable to all. One man, one woman. That is the basis of legal marriage. Mr. Brown has shattered that basis, openly and with no shame. Cross held a stack of documents that was as thick as his fist. These are certificates of marriage, financial records, and public declarations. All evidence that Mr. Brown has practiced and taught plural marriage, a lifestyle that openly defies our laws. It isn't a matter of religion. It's about being held accountable. He addressed the jury, his gaze narrowing. If we turn our heads on this, then we are indicating that laws don't count. If we make excuses for this, then where do we draw the line? Mr. Brown might portray himself as a family man, but the reality is plain. He has made a choice to live beyond the law. The courtroom was charged, thick with silence. Brown's supporters scowled. Critics nodded in assent. The lines had been drawn. It was time now for the side of Kody to have its say. His attorney Rachel Myers, a woman famous for her measured but caustic arguments, stood tall. She moved slowly towards the jury, giving the tension room to breathe before she began to speak. Her voice was warm yet firm. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard the state describe my client as though he were some criminal mastermind. But let's cut through the noise. This case isn't about crime. It isn't about harm. It's about family, something every one of us cherishes deeply. She pointed to Kody, who sat motionless, his expression determined. Mr. Brown is no thief, no man of violence, no con man, seeking to scam the system. He is a father, a husband, a believer. His so-called offense, loving more than one woman, and constructing a family based upon that love. The attorney stepped back, meeting the gaze of the jury. I ask you, does love criminalize a person? Does having children, providing for them, parenting them, and showing up in their lives condemn a person? This case isn't about law breaking. It's about whether the law itself should govern how people love, worship, and construct their families. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Some of the jurors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, openly moved. Others were stone-faced, unimpressed. The judge leaned forward, rapping his gavel once. The jury will consider evidence, not opinion. But already, the battle was obvious. The prosecution would pound the law, rules, statutes, black and white. The defense would plead heart, love, freedom, and the right to choose. It wasn't only a legal conflict, it was an ideological war, unfolding in real time. Kody sat in silence, but within him, his mind was reeling. Every word the prosecutor uttered was like a knife that sliced at his family. Every word his attorney uttered was like a delicate shield, holding them together for dear life. The tension overflowed into the courtroom audience. On the left, brow-clad Brown's supporters exchanged encouraging glances with each word Rachel spoke. This was, for them, a fight for freedom, a step in the direction of acceptance. On the right, brow-frowned opponents grumbled beneath their breath, agreeing with each utterance from the prosecutor. For them, the Browns were insurrectionists against morality and order. The judge's gaze swept the room, reminding all with a warning stare that this was not a time for tantrums. But the gulf could not be bridged. Prosecutor Cross persisted in his argument. He stepped back in the direction of his table, raising the papers again. This is not an issue of faith. Mr. Brown may believe whatever he wants to believe. But practice and belief are two different things. The law specifically dictates that marriage, as far as this state is concerned, is between one man and one woman. Anything less is not marriage. It is fraud. It is misrepresentation, and it destroys the institution that holds society together. He banged the papers on the table, the ringing echoing around the courtroom. Mr. Brown cannot choose and select which laws to adhere to. That is not freedom. That is anarchy. His words hit home. The critics in the crowd edged forward, encouraged. But Rachel Myers was prepared. She moved forward once more, her voice strong but kind. Chaos? Gentlemen and ladies, does this appear like chaos to you? A man bringing up children, bringing them through school, teaching them morals, taking care of them? Does this appear like chaos when wives collaborate to manage a home, when children are brought up amidst care and love? She faced the jury once more. The prosecution discusses statutes, but statutes are codified by human beings, and human beings are not perfect. Statutes may evolve. In the past, interracial marriage was prohibited. In the past, women were disenfranchised. Imagine if we had held on to those statutes, just because they were on paper. Progress is made when we realize that dignity, love, and human rights are more important than old-fashioned regulations. The room agitated once more. Even the judge relaxed, his face showing a flash of introspection. All the while Kody sat, his hands wrapped tightly together in front of him. He knew he couldn't say a word yet. This was his attorney's fight for the time being, but in his heart he seethed with the urge to jump up and yell, "This is my family. My wives are not victims. My children are not mistakes. We are real." But he restrained himself. His turn would come. In the meantime, he had to believe in the process, believe in his attorney, and believe that the jurors were able to look beyond the black and white pages of the law to the colors of actual human existence. Following hours of squabbling, the judge at last raised his gavel. "That will be sufficient for today. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. The gavel fell and the room was filled with murmurs. Supporters embraced one another, mouthing prayers of hope. Critics shook their heads and muttered about lawlessness. Reporters streamed out into the doors, ready to submit their headlines. Kody slowly breathed out, relaxing back in his chair. The initial confrontation was done, but the war had only just started. The charges were laid. The conflict was established, and now the world would see each move of the fight that ensued. The following morning, sunlight struggled to penetrate the high courthouse windows. The air was quiet, yet there was a hum of unspoken tension. People occupied the benches once more, some holding coffee cups, others murmuring prophecies. Journalists tested equipment. The Brown supporters shared hushed prayers. Critics crossed their arms, waiting to listen to the truth from the women themselves. The judge arrived, robes billowing, his gavel crashing sharply. Now this court will convene. We shall start with witness testimony. And thus the focus turned from Kody to his women. The bailiff announced her name, Mary Brown. Mary rose methodically, smoothing out her dress with shaking hands, walking toward the witness stand. All eyes were on her. For years they had recognized her as Kody's first wife, the one who started it all, the one who bore the most weighty history. She was sworn in and then seated, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes shifted from the judge to the jury to the prosecutor holding stinging questions. The prosecutor did not waste any time. Mrs. Brown, you are the wife of Mr. Brown, according to law, aren't you? Yes, Mary replied softly. And you know that he has taken other wives in addition to you? Mary hesitated, and then nodded. Yes, Cross leaned forward, his tone harder. Tell me, Mrs. Brown, were you pressured into this? Was Mr. Brown forced to coax you into a lifestyle you didn't wish to live? Mary's lips clenched. Her eyes flashed quickly toward Kody, before she replied. No, I made my choice. I believed in it. I still do. The prosecutor seized on this. But surely you must acknowledge that jealousy does exist, that pain does exist, that this arrangement has brought you harm. Her words shook, but she stood firm. Of course there is jealousy. I'm a human being. But suffering? No. What you say is suffering. I say sacrifice. I knew what I was doing. I believed in my husband, in my family, in my religion. You can interpret it as you wish. But I was not coerced. A ripple ran through the courtroom. Some nodded in admiration, others muttered doubt. The defense attorney smiled faintly, knowing Mary's quiet strength had struck a chord. Next came Janelle. Unlike Mary, she walked confidently, shoulders squared, her presence calm and collected. She had always been known as the pragmatic one, the wife who treated the family almost like a business, managing schedules, supporting the household with practicality. After being sworn in, she gazed straight at the jury, her eyes firm. The prosecutor started. Mrs. Brown, you and Mr. Brown are not legally married. Are you? That's right, Janelle replied obstinately. So why refer to him as your husband? Because that is what he is. Paperwork doesn't make my family. My love does. Her words were clear, unbreakable. The prosecutor attempted another tack. Would you concede that your case puts a burden on society? That families like yours put a strain on resources, cause confusion, and debase the institution of marriage? Janelle's face remained impassive. No, we don't burden anyone. We work. We pay taxes. We raise our children. We don't request the government to feed us or dress us. We just live differently. Different doesn't mean destructive. The jury changed again. One or two of them jotted down notes, their expressions thoughtful. Janelle's cool, professional tone made it difficult to ignore her testimony. Christine Brown testified next. She came into the stand with a combination of nervousness and affection. Her feelings on the surface. Unlike Janelle, Christine wore her heart on her sleeve. She had always been the one to talk candidly about the joys and challenges of plural marriage. Her eyes began to glisten with tears. Even as she swore, the prosecutor's tone eased, as if recognizing an opportunity. Mrs. Brown, tell the court what it is like to live in this situation. Christine breathed in deeply. It's difficult, she said. It's not a fairy tale. We fight. We are jealous. There are moments when I wonder if I am enough. But we also love. We support one another. We parent children together. We experience joys and sorrows together. That is our reality. The prosecutor leaned forward. So you acknowledge that it hurts? Christine's tears escaped. But her voice remained firm. Pain is in every marriage. Pain is in every family. You can sit there and criticize me. But tell me, is pain invalidating? Because if it is, then every family in this courtroom is invalid. We are human. We all hurt. But we also heal. And that's what keeps us moving. The room was still, touched by her unvarnished truth. Even the eyes of the judge softened for an instant. Lastly, Robin approached, the most recent and most unpopular wife. She had been criticized by many viewers as the cause of the family's altered dynamic. And yet here she was, last to testify, bearing the burden of public censure. Her hands trembled a bit as she swore. She sat down, her voice soft but firm. The prosecutor's tone turned piercing once more. Mrs. Brown, you are the newest addition. Isn't it true that your coming brought discord into this family? Robin fought back tears. Yes, it brought changes. Change always brings conflict. But that does not mean it devastated us. It means we grew. Cross moved a step nearer. Isn't it also true that you lawfully wedded Mr. Brown, without giving legal status to his other wives? Yes, she confessed. Her words trembling. I did, but I did it to keep the children safe. To provide for them security, not to take anyone's place, not to erase anyone. I never wanted to hurt them. I only wanted to assist. Her tears flowed unobstructed now. We are not criminals. We are not con artists. We are a family, trying to make our way in a world that doesn't want to know us. The courtroom was quiet. Even the most critical critics appeared momentarily stilled by her honesty. By the time the wives were done, the courtroom had changed. Each had spoken a different truth. Mary with her quiet strength, Janelle with her reason, Christine with her brutal candor, Robin with her fragility. Combined, their voices constructed a picture of complexity, conflict, but most of all, choice. The jury had not only learned about polygamy, they'd learned about survival, faith, sacrifice, and love. Kody, seated at the defense table, could feel his chest constricting. Pride filled him. Regardless of what the rest of the court ruled, he knew this. His wives had told their truths courageously, and no verdict would ever take that away. But Prosecutor Cross wasn't through. He stood again, his voice acerbic. Members of the jury, do not be led by heart. These women might talk about love, but the law is not based on feelings. The law is based on rules. You have to ask yourselves not if you pity their lives, but if Mr. Brown has violated the law. And the evidence replies yes. The words cut like ice, bringing the jury back to the letter of the law. The defense attorney gritted her jaw, preparing her next move. The judge rapped his gavel. Testimony concluded. Court will resume tomorrow. The wives sat back down, spent but relieved. They had spoken, each in her own way, and left their truths hanging in the air like a challenge the jury could not ignore. Fans in the stands brushed away tears. Critics murmured objections. Journalists scrambled to get every word, every tear, every second. And Kody, he extended his hand, his fingers touching each wife's as they sat on either side of him. His eyes shone. Thank you, he breathed. No matter what, you showed them who we are. The fight was hardly finished, but the wives had turned the tables. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't a forum for laws. It was about people. The courtroom was quiet. The next morning, everyone recognized this was the day they were waiting for. The wives had testified already, their voices ringing the air with emotion and truth. But now it was Kody Brown's turn. This was not only testimony. This was a reckoning. The bailiff spoke his name, Mr. Kody Brown. Kody stood up slowly, fidgeting with his tie using shaking hands. He was not a lawyer. He was not a politician. He was not an actor on set anymore. He was a dad, a husband, and a man facing the law. As he made his way to the witness stand, flashes from cameras outside the window illuminated the background like lightning. He extended his right hand, took the oath, and sat down. 18 children, 4 wives, and millions of viewers rested on his shoulders. their weight becoming almost tangible. Daniel Cross, the prosecutor, didn't lose any time. He made his way to the stand, with the patience of a predator, his voice crisp and calculated. Mr. Brown, let's start with the obvious. You're legally married to one woman, but you publicly present three more as wives. Right? Yes. Kody replied firmly but calmly. So you acknowledge that you intentionally live outside the legal definition of marriage. Kody didn't bat an eye. I acknowledge I live according to my religion, according to my vows, according to my love. If the law does not recognize them as my wives, that doesn't change who they are to me in my heart and in my family. The prosecutor sneered. So you choose and ignore which laws to keep. Handy, isn't it? Kody shifted forward in his chair, jaw clenching. No. I do what is in place to protect my family. I pay my taxes. I abide by the laws of this nation. But when legislation attempts to dictate to me whom I can marry, whom I can have children with, then I must stand up for what is right, not what is convenient. The courtroom moved. Some onlookers applauded quietly before the gavel came down. Order in the court. Cross narrowed his eyes. Mr. Brown, isn't it true that your lifestyle causes emotional harm to your wives and children? We've heard about jealousy, pain, division. Isn't that evidence that this arrangement is unstable, unhealthy? Kody inhaled deeply. His eyes shifted toward his wives, who sat watching, their faces filled with silent encouragement. Then he turned back to the jury. Every marriage has fights. Every family has pain. Do you think a husband and wife who yell at each other behind closed doors are healthier than us, just because they have only one marriage certificate? No. Families fight. That's what makes them families. The difference is we own up to it. We work on it. And we do it together. His words had a piercing effect, resonating with conviction. Even jurors who had appeared doubtful made notes. The prosecutor shifted strategy. Mr. Brown, isn't it true you were looking for fame by airing your life on television? Isn't what we're doing here just an act? Kody's eyes tightened. The cameras didn't make my family. My family was around before TV. We did the show to be honest, to come out of the closet, to let people know we weren't monsters. If anything, it made our lives more difficult. Fame didn't construct this family. Faith did. Cross scowled, noticing his hold was losing its grip. Rachel Myers, Kody's attorney, at last rose. Her tone was even but possessed the power of a tide. Mr. Brown, in your own words, why do you live the way you do? Kody gazed at the jury. His eyes sparkled, his tone gentle but unwavering. I live like this out of love. Out of the belief that love is greater than paperwork, greater than fear. I didn't marry my wives to get a reaction or to defy society. I married them because I loved them, because I wanted to have children with them, because my faith taught me family was sacred, regardless of how it appeared to outsiders. He swallowed hard and took a moment to answer. People say I'm selfish. They say I wanted too much. But ask yourself, what father doesn't want to provide a home for his children? What husband doesn't want to keep his promises? If that's guilt, then I'll own it. But I will never apologize for loving my family. The courtroom was still. His words hung in the air, irrefutable. In the courtroom, some of his supporters started crying quietly. Even one of the jurors, a middle-aged woman in a navy blazer, wiped her eyes with a tissue. Reporters frantically pounded out notes, already writing headlines. Kody Brown breaks down in courtroom. Polygamist father defends love. The judge cleared his throat, clearly moved, but attempting to remain impartial. Cross, determined not to give up, leaned forward with one last question. Mr. Brown, do you think yourself to be above the law? Kody reacted instantly. No, I think myself equal under God, under mankind. But when a law requires me to leave my family in order to be embraced, then I have to wonder whether the law is fair. Love must never be a crime. The room erupted again, supporters whispering, critics shaking their heads furiously. The judge slammed the gavel. Silence. One more outburst, and I'll clear the gallery. As Kody stepped down from the stand, the shift was visible. Jurors who had once avoided eye contact now watched him closely. Some nodded slightly. Others remained stone-faced, But the impact of his words was undeniable. Rachel whispered as he sat back down. "You did it, Kody. You gave them your truth." Kody exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. His wives reached for his hands. Christine squeezed his fingers tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since the trial began, Kody felt hope. Judge Harrison pushed his glasses up onto his nose, his face otherwise unusually thoughtful. Despite his duty not to sympathize, even he was unable to entirely disregard the human that had unfolded before him. He leaned back, rapping his gavel lightly, as though reminding himself of the law he was sworn to uphold. But in that moment, all the people in the courtroom knew something had changed. This was not about legal statutes anymore. It was about hearts and soul, about a family that would not break beneath the crushing weight of condemnation. The judge finally spoke, saying, "Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning." The gavel hit the bench, but the resonance was different this time. Not heavy, not final, but full of an odd sense of possibility. As the Browns filed out of the courtroom, reporters yelled questions, microphones pushed forward. Supporters applauded softly. Critics growled angrily. But it didn't matter at that moment, because in there, Kody knew the truth. He had finally spoken, not only as a man on trial, but as a husband, as a father, and as a believer in his family. And whether the court granted him justice or not, the world had listened to him. It was the turning point. The courtroom air was charged. Press lined the walls, fingers ready over keyboards. Supporters gripped signs outside the courthouse, praying in unison, while critics carried signs demanding justice and order. Inside, the Browns sat together in silence, their faces drawn but firm. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. Weeks of pouring their hearts out in testimony. Christine had shared her tears. Mary had shared her doubts. Janelle had testified about loyalty. Robin had begged for her children. And Kody had stood in the flames himself, proclaiming that love would never be a crime. Now it was out of their control. Before the jury could reach a verdict, both sides had one final opportunity to address them. Prosecutor Daniel Cross stood up first, his suit immaculate, his voice as cold as steel. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, pacing before them, "you have heard evidence intended to tug at your hearts. But this case has nothing to do with the heart. It is about the law. The Browns have openly and defiantly admitted that they disregard the laws of this state. They acknowledge that they call themselves married outside the legal context. They acknowledge that they flaunt their lifestyle in front of millions on TV. If we as society ignore such defiance, we disintegrate the very fabric of order. Today, you must choose. Will we respect the law, or will we allow ourselves to be blinded by sentiment?" His voice echoed with power. He concluded with a chilly look at Kody. "No man, no matter how many cameras from TV crews, is above the law." The prosecutor sat down. The room hummed. Then Rachel Myers, the Browns' attorney, rose. Unlike Cross, she did not pace. She stood there, her hands clasped, her voice calm but filled with warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her gaze running over the jury. "The prosecution would have you think that this case is one of rebellion, of arrogance, of a man who believes he can outwit the law. But that's not what you witnessed in this courtroom. What you witnessed was a family with problems, yes, but also with love, with commitment, with faith." She took a step forward, her voice dropping. "The Browns are not criminals. They are parents and mothers raising kids, just like you. They are not requesting you to alter your beliefs. They are requesting you to see them as people. To recall that occasionally the law finds itself behind morality, and that punishing a man for loving his family accomplishes nothing but the destruction of innocent lives." Her last words cut into the silence. "Do not punish love. Do not punish family. Let them live in peace." The courtroom burst into muffled applause, until the judge slammed his gavel. The jurors walked out. The doors closed, and time ground to a crawl. Each tick of the courthouse clock sounded like thunder. Christine murmured a prayer to herself. Mary held a tiny notebook with phrases of support scrawled on it. Robin swayed gently, rosary clutched in her fist. Janelle fixed her eyes ahead, her expression impassive, yet her leg jiggled with nervous tension. And Kody, He just sat there looking at the floor, his fists balled up. For once, no words, no speeches, just silence. They waited hours. Then night came. The Browns were dismissed in ignorance. Only fear. Reporters surrounded their van, calling out questions. Kody, do you regret your testimony? Christine, what if he gets convicted? Robin, do you believe the show destroyed your lives? None of them answered. They were strengthless now. The morning after the call came, the jury had given their verdict. The Browns came back to the courthouse, hearts racing. It was so still you could hear the rustle of papers. Will the defendant rise? Said the judge. Kody rose. His wives rose with him, gripping hands tightly. A chain of strength. The silver-haired, weary-eyed forewoman of the jury stood holding the verdict slip in a shaking hand. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kody Brown. The room leaned in. Not guilty. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Reporters sprinted for the doors, hoping to be first with the story. Supporters burst into tears of happiness. Even some critics seemed stunned. Kody's knees gave way, and Christine caught his arm to hold him up. Tears streamed down Robin's face. Mary wept softly into her hands. Janelle exhaled a breath she had been holding for days. The forewoman went on, her tone calmer now. We felt that although the law had to be obeyed, there was no evidence of intent to injure. This was not a fraud case, or a case of abuse. This was a case of family decisions. And we, the jury, cannot judge love. The judge slammed his gavel, but even his tone was quieter now. The defendant is acquitted. Court is adjourned. Chaos erupted. Reporters thrust microphones in the Browns' faces. Fans hugged one another, cheering. A few detractors yelled in anger, saying justice had failed them. But it all didn't matter at that moment, because the Browns had won. Kody hugged his wives tightly, speaking in tears. We did it. We survived. Christine met his gaze. No, Kody, we didn't just survive. We told our truth. When they finally emerged outside, the crowd exploded. Cameras popped like fireworks. Supporters brandished signs that said love wins and family is family. Kody paused on the courthouse steps, standing with his wives. He held up his hand for silence. Reporters hushed, microphones raised. His voice boomed over the crowd. We are not perfect individuals. We are not requesting anybody to live like us. We are just requesting to live freely. Today the jury observed that love is not a crime, and for that, we thank you. Not just for us, but for all of those families who ever been informed they don't belong. Cheers erupted. His speech would lead the newspaper headlines and fill television screens later that evening. During the weeks that followed, the verdict caused a countrywide stir. Talk shows debated law and morality. Politicians opined. Twitter went wild with hashtags #Love is not a crime and #Justice for the Browns. Some states promised to close loopholes. Others demanded reform. But regardless of politics, something was certain: the Browns had altered the conversation. Back at home, the Browns sat down for dinner. No cameras, no reporters, no judges, just family. The table was packed with kids, laughter, and plates heaped high with food. For the first time in months, there was peace. Kody surveyed the table, his heart full. He breathed softly to himself. This is why I fought. Christine met his eye and smiled gently. Robin rested against his shoulder. Janelle and Mary shared weary but thankful glances. They had walked through fire, and even though scars still showed, they were stronger for it. The Browns knew it wasn't over yet. The trials would come back. Public scrutiny, internal strife, the burden of being odd. But now they had something no judge or jury could ever strip from them. Vindication. They had stood in front of the law, open and bare, and they had walked out free. Kody sat on the porch that evening, the desert sky above him, full of stars. The laughter of his children was audible in the distance. His wives' voices hummed in the house, and in that stillness, he knew the truth. The judgment hadn't only saved him, it had encouraged his family. It had proved to the world that even when society pushes back, love will still rise. The fight was over. But the Browns' story, their love, their struggle, their defiance, was just starting.